welcome back. It is Bones, and today let's go ahead and take a look at some custom work that I have done. Now, this idea actually comes from my boy Botan, who was talking to me about making a Superman figure using McFarlane parts, but that the costume does not have any sculpting designs, extra added detail or design lines in the costume. We also wanted to make one a little bit taller so that he would scale a lot better with taller figures. Basically, for me, Superman and Batman should actually be some of the tallest figures. I think aside from Lobo, Martian Manhunter, you're looking at these guys as some of the taller characters in the whole DC line. So it's kind of sad that we've been seeing that same infected body that's a little bit squat, and also the Page Puncher's Superman book is not really any taller. It's basically the same size as the infected body. So, as you know me, I'm always up for a challenge. So I went ahead and dug in, and I've been working on this for a couple of weeks. Tried a little bit of new things, new techniques, and we'll see how it came out. So of course, here he is. This is my definitive version of Superman. Let's take a closer look at him. Now, I wanted to go with a lighter blue because of course McFarlane usually makes a more darker blue costume for Superman. Now with the recent first appearance, that's a real light blue, and this blue is a little bit darker even than that one, which is preferably what I would like. Now I did want to do a complete new technique to the painting. So what I ended up finding were these little paints, Tamiya. Now you could get these online. They're pretty cheap, about 10 bucks. But these are actually made to adhere to plastic. So if you could get your figure ready, clean it up a little bit, sand it a little bit, and spray a light coat of this, it gives it a real nice bond, and you just let it dry. The only problem is, this is just one color. I did buy two of these. I bought a red and a light blue. So my plan was to spray it, let it dry, and then actually add paint after. So even though it was like a real baby blue, I went in after and put a little bit deeper blue on top of that to give it some different tones and some different shades like around the muscles and stuff like that. So I do like the way it came out. Now you do retain articulation. You can move the shoulder, you got the bicep swivel, you can bend the elbow, and all of that was due to the paint that I used and allowing it to dry and doing a first nice light coat, not putting the paint too thick. And then when I went in with the brush, it was a lot easier for the paint to stick on, and I didn't really put any where the joints are. It was more for the highlights of the musculature and stuff like that. So it actually worked out pretty good. Of course, every time you do a custom, you learn a little bit more, you get a little bit better. And I have done this before with my first classic blue Superman. We'll compare them later on, but I do actually prefer this one. Now, let's get into what I actually used to make this as we go down. Now, this body is actually the vampire Batman body. I had, cannibalized some parts from that figure, so I had the body left over. It is based on the Hush Batman body book or the Three Jokers, but it's more of a Hush body. But surprisingly, it actually fits really well with this figure. Now, up at the neck, I had to find a way because, of course, the Hush body has that peg where the whole neck peg goes into there. And I cut out, there's a little ball sticking up. I cut that out, and then I made a sort of square shape. So I had to make something to accept the upper neck part from the infected Superman, because that's where I actually got the neck portion, because of course the Hush body has that plug for the neck, and this head that I wanted to use actually has to sit on a neck. So once I cut out that upper neck portion from the infected Superman, another figure that I had cannibalized parts from, and I just had it laying around. So everything pretty much worked out for me, as in using parts from figures that I actually had. So once I cut out that upper neck part, and then the infected Superman's neck fit in there, and I was happy with it, I actually warmed it up and put some super glue in there and then pushed it inside so that it would fit like in that port that I made for it. And it actually, fit perfectly. It sits exactly the way it's supposed to. And then all I had to do, of course, was paint the neck because it is a different color from the infected Superman, which is a really pale whitish color. So I did a mixture of skin tones, added a couple of little pinkish hues, and then let that dry, and then I sealed it. So that way I could put the head on and move it around without rubbing any of the paint off of the neck. Now this head sculpt is actually from Superman 1000. I had an extra one left over from a custom that I did a long time ago. And it was just rolling around. I never really used it, so it worked out perfectly. I didn't have to end up buying a different Superman 1000, and I used the same head. Found the neck peg that fits perfectly, and it's there. You can still articulate. He does look down really well. Looks up even better for flight poses. And you got right to left, and you could still tilt his head for some character. Now I did repaint the skin tone a little bit on the face, and I added some deep blue dots to the eyes to give him those like piercing blue eyes. And then the hair is notoriously shiny from the Superman 1000, but I decided to use that and put some flat black but still leave some of that high gloss from the original paint. And then I added some blue highlights just to give it that, Superman tone of blue in the hair that they usually have. So really happy with it. The head looks awesome. Really proud of the way that part came out, connected to the neck from infected Superman, and then sitting on the vampire Batman body, which is crazy. So then I had to remove the Batman symbol, and once I did that, it did leave a little bit of gaps around the symbol. Was where I put this Superman shield, of course, from Superman 1000. It didn't cover it exactly, so I did have to mix up some epoxy and fill it in and then smooth it out and sand it to give you that, full look where it doesn't have any gaps around the symbol or the S shield. But once again, it did come out pretty nice. I'm happy with that. I glued it in. Everything just as I went. If I had to cut out portions of plastic, I would just cut it out with a blade and basically custom make everything to fit where it's supposed to. So it was a lot of work. That's why it took me, a couple of weeks, but I am happy with the final product. So you got the head, you got the neck, the S shield sits in the chest perfectly. You got the first light coat of blue. Now another thing I had to do was actually cut off the blades from the gauntlets that are on the Batman body. So I actually just sliced those off and then sanded it, and it came out pretty good because it kind of looks like musculature, where some of the little like divots in the plastic were, it just kind of fits perfectly. It looks like forearm tendons or something like that. And sanded it down to where I was happy with it. And once I covered it with the paint, fits really good. Now the good part about this is you have no design lines in the costume, and it basically ends at a flat part of like a costume sleeve. Now the wrist balls actually come from the penguin from the Battinson wave, so I switched out and put some black ones into my penguin. Now, surprisingly, that's another figure that I had bought extra, that penguin, because I'm going to use the arms from that figure for another custom. But I had to change pegs. So since these were flesh colored, I went ahead and used them for this Superman. So it's kind of weird how it all falls into place when you need the parts. It's there, which is really nice. And surprisingly, the pegs for this actually fit the hands from the 2-pack of Ultraman, or the Earth 3 2-pack. So that's where I got these fists from. But if you would like, you pop them out, and these pegs actually fit the flight hands from the Doomsday 2-pack. And these were the ones I chose to go with for this figure. They work actually really well. Just to give you a different, to put them in flying poses or to have them gesturing. Pretty nice. So that's another thing that worked out really well. Got the hands from the Doomsday 2-pack and the fists from the Ultraman 2-pack. So that all worked out really well. Moving down, you got the trunks actually from Superman 1000. Now, it's not a perfect fit. It's pretty close. There's a slight, gap in there. But when you articulate the legs or pose them, it's not a big deal. It still looks really good. I mean, I would rather actually buy this, even with its little flaws, than to have to buy another infected Superman body. So I'm pretty happy with it. The color scheme fit perfectly. Now here's where I did do some exact custom work, and that is that these are the thighs from the Vampire Batman, but the lower legs are actually from the infected Superman. So I had to take out the pegs. I did a little bit of trimming on the thighs. All in all, it came out looking pretty good. You can't really tell a difference like in the proportions, and he still is a taller figure even by using the infected calves or lower part of the suit. Now the red was not matching to the rest of the costume, and that's where I used that other red paint. Once again, I just did a light coat, let it dry for a day or two, and then they were ready. Even the ball joints and the boots were ready to articulate. Now if you lift up the boot, you can actually see the original color underneath the toe joint. I wanted to leave that just to remind myself the difference. It was a real deep red, and this is a brighter, more like fire engine red. So it does match now better with the trunks and with the cape. Speaking of the cape, let's take a look at the cape. Now, I had a hard decision because I kind of wanted to use the Ultraman cape. It is basically this same shape, but it's a little bit wider, and it's also a little bit softer plastic. So it's lighter, and it kind of draped on this figure a little bit better. But in the end, I would have had to cannibalize one of my Ultramans. And since I did have this extra cape from the Superman 1000, I just went, with the more classic look and with the part that was easier at hand. So sometimes you got to make those executive decisions. Now another thing I added was the yellow S on the back. Now I'm not a big fan of the yellow S on the Hush. I mean, it's cool that they put it, but it's just a little bit big for me. I just never imagine it so large. I imagine it smaller than the chest shield. So I actually use this. It's from a cloth Mattel Superman, and I just cut out around the symbol and then just glued it on here onto the back. So then once I had all that ready, I attached the cape to the shoulders, and that actually helped me to cover any of the imperfections that were where I connected the neck to the shoulders from the infected Superman into the Vampire Batman, upper chest, and wherever it had anything ugly, the cape actually covers that up so you can't really see it. So all in all, it's a clean custom. Now I love his stature, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to tackle this project. And I'm pretty happy with him the way he came out. Takes a lot of finagling and detailed work, but you can achieve a clean costumed Superman Now, I only want to compare them to a couple of figures. First, let's compare them to my first shot at this, which was my classic Superman. Now, this is completely the infected body, but it's mixed up with parts from Superman 1000. But as you can see, he's slightly shorter than this newer definitive version, but I still like him as well. He is one of my first, like, really customs that I put my heart into, so I'll always have a sweet spot for him in my collection. Of course, the main reason I made this is because I wanted a Superman to go with the Hush Batman. And when I mean go with, I mean scale wise. He's actually like slightly taller than the Hush Batman, which is rather interesting considering some of the parts that I used. But for me, this is what I imagine when I imagine Superman and Batman. Superman being slightly taller, but not by much, but also them two being some of the larger characters in the DC universe. Plus the fact that they're ripped and really muscular is like my preference for these characters. That's him next to Hush, the blue version. But more than likely, this guy is going to be displayed next to my custom black version of Hush Batman. This for me is the definitive two, the way I imagine them in my mind. This is the world's finest. This is, my definitive Superman and my definitive Batman. I really like the trunks on this Batman. They are actually the trunks from the Vampire Batman, which, like I said, that's one of the figures that I just happen to have lying around and that actually helped me to make this Superman with minimal cost. I mean, all the parts I already had. I didn't have to order anything extra, except for the paint. That is something that I had never used before, but I did like the way it worked, and I may start incorporating it more in my customs. But anyways, guys, that's basically it. Took me a while. I know everybody wanted to check it out and know the parts that I used to make this Superman. But you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.